way we know it's working.
Okay. Should be going.
All right, Frank, I'm going to start bringing people in.
Okay, sounds good.
Welcome, everyone. We're trying to get everyone connected. We'll be with you in just one moment to get things underway. Just want to make sure everybody has access to audio, but so they don't miss anything. All right, Sue, if others come, please admit them. But good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Zoom Time Knowledge. If this is your first time joining us, know that this is a free public education series hosted by the James Madison University Lifelong Learning Institute. My name is Rodney Wolfenbarger. I have the pleasure of serving as director of the Lifelong Learning Institute. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Sue G. Sue is program assistant and is helping to manage the meeting technology. So if you have any problems with audio, video, or need any assistance, please feel free to use that chat window. We'll be able to help get you fully connected. Today, we're joined by our special guest presenter, Frank Doherty, who is presenting on flower photography, A World of Grace. Frank is going to provide an introduction as part of his planned presentation about his background and history of association with JMU and LLI. But for now, I just want to mention, if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Frank or taking one of his classes, you should know that he's a local fine arts photographer and a retired JMU administrator, and he has been photographing flowers for more than 15 years. Frank believes that each flower photo is a gift of grace, often appearing at unexpected times and places, and hence that's the title of today's presentation. Frank, thank you for sharing your time with us today, sharing your knowledge and experience as part of Zoom Time Knowledge. At this point, I'll turn it over to you. Sue and I are in background if you need any assistance.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. As usual, I'd like to give a shout out to Rodney and Sue because of how well they do this and how well they help provide assistance in trying to do this type of thing. I guess Zoom is something we've learned, many of us, unfortunately, because we've had to. But so anyway, welcome. Thank you for coming today. What I want to talk about is flower photography. I love flowers. When I'm in December, January, February, I'm like, when's the flowers going to come? I want the color. And so I'm going to talk about that, talk about how I've been able to find flowers, where, how to, in terms of taking pictures. Actually, if you look right now at just the title page, if you look at that picture, which many of you will recognize from the Arboretum at JMU, that's one of my favorite places to go. There are a couple of things interesting about this picture, though, kind of which I think is kind of about grace, a free gift. I took this about 15 years ago. But at that time, my office at JMU was a 5-minute walk almost from the Arboretum. And one afternoon, we had a really bad rainstorm, but it washed the air very clear. And everyone, I'm sure, who was in the Arboretum took off. So I left my office, drove by it, got to Costco and said, I gotta turn around. So I went here and just saw this magnificent, incredible view of the Arboretum. Now, what is interesting about it is I have returned to this exact place every year since 2005. and it has never been this good. The reason is that there are daffodils here that always bloomed before this, before I got this picture. So in terms of grace, this is the only time it's looked like this in the last 15 years. I am amazed. I was there last week. No daffodils. Or actually, there were a few. I came back a day or so later and they were gone. So that's kind of what I think was almost what I'm thinking about is it was grace. It was a free gift. Before I get going into this, let me talk a little bit about myself. As Rodney alluded to, I've lived in the Valley since 1984, have been in Harrisonburg for 34 years. I worked at JMU for 32 years. I was director of institutional research for most of those years, which is a numbers game. So nothing to do with photography or art at all, other than we count the number of professors in the art department, but that was about it. My photography, at least my perspective is it's about grace, a free gift. Here was 50-year-old guy, running the numbers, always liked art. I mean, I got the art medal in the 7th grade, but that was it. But on my 50th birthday, almost 20 years ago now, I asked my wife what I'd like. She asked me what I'd like for a present. And I said, I think I'd like to have a digital camera. And so we did some research, got a 2-megapixel camera for $400. And I started out and I just experienced a lot of joy in taking photos. For me, who is mostly a numbers person, this is almost about my gut. I'm looking for a feeling as I'm taking these pictures, and most of these register with me. I've taken 7 online classes from working pros. I was a member of Oasis Gallery for more than 13 years. If many of you have probably visited that downtown. I've taught 3 classes for LLI. They have been more of a tour, like a spring tour of the most photogenic places in our community. And my goal today is to share my joy in photographing flowers with practical ideas. But I can't go further on without introducing Tatum. Tatum is my granddaughter. The last time I saw her was a year and a half ago or so, Thanksgiving. This is Tatum then. Tatum is visiting next week, so she just turned 2. And it looks like next week that Tatum and I are going to be a duo for 4 or 5 of those days because her mom and dad work remotely and my wife teaches school. So it'll be Tatum and granddad for a while. That's going to be interesting. I've had 2-year-old before, but nothing like this. We'll see. Nothing. I just had boys. We had boys. So anyway, let me start with this. Let me talk about grace. Now, there are many definitions or people talking about grace. There are often some very spiritual ramifications of it for many people. I'm going to simply define it as a free gift, unmerited favor. And what I mean is that every flower is unique in some way. The best flowers that I have photographed have often come unexpectedly, especially in nature. Now you see in front of you, bloodroot, 2 bloodroots. Bloodroot is a beautiful little flower that appears in about early April. And I decided several weeks ago to take a walk over at Lake Shenandoah, which is very close to where I live and one of my favorite places to walk. But in the hundreds of times I've been to Lake Shenandoah, I've never walked around it. So I said, shoot, I've got some time. So I went around Lake Shenandoah, crossed the bridge, entered into part of the trail that goes through the woods. And all of a sudden there were 2 bloodroots. which I think are an absolutely awesome flower. They're just so beautiful, but it was totally unexpected. And so that made it really kind of neat. I was very excited. So here I am trying to get down on the ground to take some. This one was taken from above, but I've got some from other perspectives. So for me, grace is kind of a free gift. And flowers for me are one of the best examples of that. Okay, what I want to do is explore the flowers that are around us, and they're all around us. Describe methods to take flower pictures and tell some stories about flowers that I found by grace. Now, to the right side, the larger picture, many of you may recognize this as the Matterhorn, and it's in Zermatt, Switzerland. Zermatt is my favorite place in the world. I've been fortunate enough to go there 4 times, and every time the Matterhorn has just been gorgeous. But my son and I went skiing there for a week a number of years ago, and our room had this magnificent view of the Matterhorn. It was just like incredible. So part of the balcony was, I photographed the Matterhorn from the balcony, but these little tulip imprints were carved into this balcony. They were all along the way. So I shot that through kind of a tulip, but the Matterhorn. I haven't been there for a while, and I don't know if I'll ever get there again, but it's, I love that place. Over here to the left, I think this may be an apple, but I'm not sure. Maybe a crab apple or something like that. And of course, dogwoods. I love dogwoods. Okay, let's go. Okay. So the nice thing about flowers is like you don't have to go to Switzerland to see flowers. We have an incredible place, the Arboretum, which right now is in magnificent bloom. It is, for me, it's the best time of year to be there. I try to go there at least once a week, sometimes a couple of times. But actually, backyard gardens, you can find flowers. My wife and I just moved into a new, smaller home in the Overbrook subdivision in McGaheysville, and we've grown flowers there. I love it. You can see flowers at the grocery store. You probably want to ask first if you can take pictures of them. In a flower nursery, you get some incredible views of flowers. Go over to Lowe's in their garden center. I usually say ask first and maybe buy something so people know what you're doing. As I say, I spent 32 years at JMU, and I really enjoyed it. But Dr. Carrier, who was present when I came there, he loved flowers, and he said the flowers should be everywhere in the spring. And they love to bring in tours of the university around Easter, spring break, because the campus is in amazing bloom at that time. Of course, when you're traveling, unless you're going somewhere in the midwinter, you may well be able to find flowers. Some places very small, but at least my perspective is they're almost everywhere. In this photo, in this slide, you can see the Arboretum, and that's how it is right now. There's some mums in the top right, and I think I got those from a grocery store. The bottom left is of the sun shot through some, not crocus, cosmos. So it looks a little bit like a bird. And the one on the left was taken about a year ago up in Shenandoah National Park. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember what that is. But anyway, the basic thing is flowers are everywhere. You don't have to go anywhere special. Now, the different kinds of equipment to use. I use for a lot of my photos an SLR, and a shout out to Joe Laughlin for his class on using manual mode. Thank you, Joe, because that's improved some of my flower photography. I often use a macro lens, which to get me sharper pictures up close. On the other hand, a camera phone will work. It will work very well. And while most of us don't use small pocket cameras anymore, you can still use a small pocket camera well to see flowers. So let me go on. Okay. Many of you love to take pictures of your family and friends, and some of you probably have a class or done something to learn about how to take portraits of people. I've done a little bit of it, but I'm not necessarily a portrait photographer. But if you think about flowers, you can, a flower is like the main subject. You can almost think of it in terms of portraits. You can take a picture of a friend from the side, or head first, possibly even from above. So that's a little bit like, so flower photography is a lot like portraiture. Things you might want to consider is depth of field. How much can you see through the flower? In this case, and I'm blanking on that flower. I don't think it's a bluet, but anyway, but you can see the flower is sharp, the background is blurred. There are other things like rule of thirds, where I've put this flower, so it is kind of in one of the quadrants, lower left. But, there are things about background, what's in the background. Actually, if you look at my picture here where I'm talking, I thought I was going to get a good background in our house, and it's not that great, but it works. There are different perspectives, timing, time of year, time of day. There is framing, where you kind of create a visual frame within the picture, not something that you're putting on a wall. And there's something else I call serendipity, is like, wow, or something was really neat just happened. So what are the best times to take flowers? The top right is actually a photo out my back of my house of the woods during a big snowstorm this spring. So you don't want to take pictures then. On the other hand, cloudy days are actually some of the best days for taking flower pictures. And why? It's because there's no contrast. If I went outside right now, it's a beautiful day, but if I was trying to take pictures of some flowers in my garden, it would be have a lot of contrast, not necessarily that great. And given it's the middle of the day, that's what I would expect. Often early morning or evening, where the sun is, if it's a sunny day, it's still like golden hour. The sky is often beautiful or with different colors, and that's usually the best time. Like these bloodroot here, I found in at the Arboretum, just walking around. I had a friend of mine, he and I were walking. I said, how about Forrest, can you just stand in front of those and block the sun? So that's what I got. And I think the poppies on the right-hand bottom, I don't remember where I got that. Usually I do, but not this time. Whoops. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay. Now, depth of field is how clear is it through the photo, whoops, from the beginning to the end. And you can see these are, this top left one with flowers that grew from just seeds that the birds dropped. We put out sunflower seeds, and it just grew there, and it was magnificent. But you can see the clouds in the background as well as the flowers at the front are clear. It means if you have an SLR, it means like a small aperture like f10 or higher to be able to do that. Now you can see on the flower on the crocus here, I took in the Arboretum probably about at least a month ago. I was down on the ground and I did have my SLR, but you see how this part of the crocus is very clear and the other kind of blurs. This flower, I am not quite sure what it is. Some of you may know, it might be a hydrangea. There's not a hydrangea. Anyway, it's in the Arboretum. And then the one on the bottom left, this daffodil, it's from the Arboretum. And actually what I did is to get that, I was lying on the ground, took my camera in one hand, tried to get it up close to that flower without really seeing it clearly, and just took a bunch of pictures. And that one came out. You can see how clear it is at the edge, but it's blurred at the back. Whoops. Okay, so that's depth of field. Let me talk about perspective. There are many different angles to use to take flower photos. Even from above can work. The crocus in the middle here were taken at the Arboretum. If some of you have walked from the parking area that's not way above at higher up parking area, it's the easiest place to get in here, in this case, to walk through the Arboretum. Anyway, it was just growing beside the walkway. So I took my iPhone and just shot this just from above. Nothing complicated. And I like it. The one to the bottom left, this daffodil was or is in our flower garden in the back of our house. And I took that one by getting down very low with my iPhone and took the photo. I might use my SLR, but I think I did my iPhone, but it's from the side. Now, the photo here on the top right is from Monticello. My wife, this was probably 10 years ago, my wife was taking a class at Albemarle High School, and I had the day free. So I said, shoot, I'm going to go Monticello, without knowing about Mr. Jefferson's love for tulips and how they were in incredible viewing right now. They're amazing, just amazing. And you can see, though, I took it from kind of toward the bottom base of the flower with one in the background. The flower picture to the bottom right is of a cosmos that we planted. This was of our old house. We used to live in Battlefield Estates, and we sold it because we needed a smaller house. But you can see the Massanutten in the background. It's the early morning shot. So I'm taking it from the backside of the cosmos and with the sun. So that's a different perspective. So just taking a shot from face on can work. It can work from a sides, but it can also work from the back. So just kind of like people would do in portrait photography, although you probably wouldn't take pictures back of someone's head. In this case, you can see how it's, you can see through the cosmos. I like that picture. Okay. So let me talk now about framing. When you think of a frame, of course, you think, well, what if I got framed pictures in our home, which I like. But framing is actually using something within the picture to create a frame around an object. One of my other favorite little places to visit is in Assisi, is in St. Francis of Assisi in Italy. And I took this picture, you can see through a window in the second floor. This was actually the chapel where St. Francis mostly went or lived. But you can see the frame around it. Now, last summer, my wife and I decided to go up to the Shenandoah National Park. And so I was a little crippled at that point. I had some back surgery, but I was doing well. So I was close enough to walk around and see the flowers. And you can see how this is framed by other flowers. And I think there's a critter in there. These daffodil here, that was at the Arboretum. There's still some daffodils left. They have a March spring daffodil walk that's amazing, but you can see kind of how it's framed by the other colors. In the top right, this is another photo from Monticello of some red buds, gorgeous red buds. And there's kind of a frame within here, but it's more almost like framed by the green. And this final bottom right, that's a photo of my appropriately named cat, Daisy. We had flowers on our dining room table and she was looking through it. So that's kind of a grace shot. And someone asked me, could I pose it? Like, you try to pose a cat? Forget it. So that's Daisy being framed by some other flowers. Okay, let me go on. Now, also, when you flower pictures, if you got flowers, you're probably going to have some insects or animals near it. Now, in this case, this echinacea with a bee, that was in our front yard. We had a whole bed of echinacea. And so that was one I got several years ago. The one to the bottom, my wife and I were at, hold on. I got my notes on my iPad to the left here, just to show you why I'm going back. It looks like I'm looking over there because I am. Okay. My wife and I visited Ireland a few years ago, but the last name of Doherty, it's got to be Irish. So Lord willing, if you have the finances, if you can take a trip, I love Ireland. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. But we went to a place close to what's called Newgrange. Some of you may have been there. We did not get in to see Newgrange, but we could see it from a distance. But in the parking lot, I was walking across the parking lot and I saw this butterfly with this, I'm not quite sure what that flower is, but it's really pretty. One thing you might want to think about if you're trying to get animals, if you have a camera, an iPhone will do it, SLRs will do it, where when you push down on the shutter, if you can take multiple shots, you're likely to get maybe one of those is really going to be fairly clear because insects move very quickly. Now, the last one on the right, I still can't tell you how I got it, but it's of a snowdrop, which usually blooms. In this case, it was probably late February, early March. And I was in the Arboretum and I wanted to take a picture of it. And snowdrop is very small flower. It's a beautiful flower. I love them. But I was kind of got down on the ground and all of a sudden this insect flew into it and I took the pictures. I've never had that happen before like that, but it was kind of framed with the crocus at the bottom and that little fly or something like that was on it. So it was a surprise, like most of the flowers I end up taking. So let's talk about unique presentations. You're going to find flowers in many places. often unexpected. This one on the top left of the bicycle with the flowers, that was taken in Italy, probably in Florence, because a lot of people will do that. They're just beautiful. One on the top right, with those flowers with the bike, I found at the Denver Zoo a couple of years ago. And I said, wow, that's neat. The one in the bottom left is from Assisi. And a lot of people will do this with their flowers. They'll have their entrance to their family home and they'll put flowers all around it. I just thought it was beautiful. The one to the bottom right, some of you may have seen this a few years ago. On Route 33, close to town, Route 33 east, coming in towards town, not far from Massanetta Springs, someone planted sunflowers. And they've done this a couple of times. These were the prettiest. And so one morning, I snuck in. Probably wasn't supposed to do that, but I snuck in because the way these sunflowers were facing was fascinating. They were facing toward the sun, as you expect, they're sunflower. But I just thought it was just so pretty there, and to get the flowers in that way was a gift. They were there, and it was just incredible. I loved it. And I got a lot of flower pictures, a lot of sunflowers there, but I think that was one of the ones I liked the best. Okay, now macro photography, a close-up, very small close-up photography. If you have an SLR and a macro lens, it probably you can probably get the best, but it certainly can be done with a camera phone because I've done it with a camera phone. This little crocus right here, my wife and I found that when we took a long weekend to Williamsburg a few years ago. And this was probably in February because they get spring a little bit earlier in Williamsburg. But it's small. You see how it's sharp at the beginning and it blurs out very quickly. This crocus here to the right of that, I also took at the Arboretum. And you can see where the stamen, I guess, is very clear, very sharp, but part around it is somewhat sharp, but it blurs out. So that kind of brings your focus to that. So here down to the bottom left, I think that's a black-eyed Susan. I hope. I think it's a black-eyed Susan. But you could see, I think that I took that with an iPhone. But how clear it could be, but pretty close. I'm getting probably just a few inches from it. And then finally, the one on the right, a cosmos, that would have been from my garden at our previous home. Again, from the back, but very close up, very sharp. Okay, let me talk about serendipity. It's a word I kind of like. Merriam-Webster says the faculty or phenomenon of finding valuable or agreeable things not sought for. Grace, a free gift. And the one to the top left, Cosmos with the ladybug, was taken at my previous home in the front yard. I went out one morning to get the paper. And as I was walking down the hill to get it, to get the paper, I saw this cosmos and I saw that little ladybug on it. I was like, wow, can I get this? So I went back to the house as quickly as I could, got my camera. Unfortunately, the ladybug had stayed there. And so I got this really neat shot. I wasn't expecting it at all. The one to the right, I just had told you about in Williamsburg. I was just walking around looking down at the ground. Now, sometimes driving, I am probably not as safe as I ought to be. because my eyes are attracted by color and beautiful things. So I drive by something, I said, wonder how I can get that. And then steer my car back into the lane where it's supposed to be. This flower here, this orchid here, it was interesting the way I got it. I had, my wife is a teacher and she was going to a conference in Richmond. So out on West Broad Street, I think there's a very large and beautiful nursery. So I went out with my camera. So what can I find? I went in there and I saw this room just full of orchids, the most amazing orchids I'd ever seen. They were just gorgeous. And it turned out that there was a regional, statewide, or even larger orchid show going on. So I walked in. I mean, it was a real competition, but they were just kind of finishing setting up. And so I was like, can I take pictures? Sure. So I had 45 minutes almost to myself to be able to take pictures of beautiful, gorgeous orchids. They were just amazing. And so this is just one of them, but that was serendipity. I wasn't expecting it at all. And so they were just amazing. Okay, you can also do sometimes serendipity with simple flowers. So I would have to say dandelions are not my favorite. I think they're pretty, but they're not my favorite. But I was getting my son's car windshield repaired, not far from Lowe's. And so I was standing a little bit outside and I saw the dandelion just sitting there saying, take my picture. So I took the dandelion from several perspectives. This was from above, obviously. This one was a little bit actually from very low, almost going straight up. And there was the wall here with nice background. Here's one from the side. Again, a different perspective. And then this is what they grow into. And near my house, I've got fields with a whole bunch of dandelions. They're beautiful flower, actually. If you can get up a little bit close to them, they're magnificent in the way they are made. They are created. And I just love I don't love dandelions. I put it up on the web and people said, oh, we used to make dandelion wine and eat them. Like, I've never done that, but to me, they're a pest when I get in my yard, but they are beautiful. And they're, particularly when you have this that are intricate, they're just amazing. Finally, well, in terms of serendipity, anyway, sometimes you see very, very small flowers, particularly this time of year. So I was in my front yard. We're working on something, and I saw these little tiny flowers. I honestly don't know the name of it. Some of them may know the name of it. I don't. But from above, like, you can hardly see them. As you get a little bit closer, you can begin to see them. And I mean, this is probably a foot or 18 inches above. You can see how tiny they are. And I took a whole bunch of pictures to try to get up close, but this is what it is. So actually, it's a really pretty little flower. It's tiny. Probably from one side to the other is maybe 1/4 of an inch. But if you can get up close, and I think I did this with my iPhone. Anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful little flower. Very surprising. Okay, let me talk about what I do sometimes to have fun with using software with flowers. If you have Photoshop, many of you do, many of you don't. I used a little program on my iPad called Photoshop Mix, which allowed me to cut out things. In this case, I cut out these flowers, a couple crocus, a blanking on the one to the top right, but then the fuchsia down at the bottom. And I digitally removed the background and replaced it with just a black background. And so I do this with some, and I love it. I think they can be really, really pretty here. It's a very different perspective, but I like it. Okay. So let me talk about travel. My wife and I have been fortunate to travel a number of places here in the US and Costa Rica, and then some in Western Europe. And I love to do that. But this is really close to us. Here is Monticello. And tulips were a Thomas Jefferson favorite. And he planted them everywhere. And they bloom in mid-April. They probably should be in full bloom right now. So here were different ones I got then. The next one, my wife's family, grandparents were Swedish. And we've been able to get in contact with some of her relatives. So we've gone to visit them actually twice. One place we went was very, very northern Sweden. I mean, right now it's still probably snow covered. We were like an hour from the Arctic Circle. But lupins grow wild in northern Sweden. They also grow wild in Nova Scotia, and they're beautiful. And actually, this bottom right, if you can see it, that's a picture of a shower, shower curtain in our home. I found out that there's a place online called Shower Curtains, Photo Shower Curtains. It's for about $100, you can upload a flower, anything you want to take the picture, and they'll make it into a shower curtain. So this is our guest bathroom of lupins. This picture right here is from a beautiful town in Sweden, not that far from Stockholm, called Uppsala. Huge university there, one of the largest universities in Sweden. And there's the cathedral in the back. And so you can see how I kind of framed the cathedral with these flowers, which they had on all these bridges. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember this one, name of it, but I thought it was really pretty. Whoops. So anyway, that was Sweden. Again, I'm just looking. I'm not looking for anything in particular. I'm just viewing it, and if you do a lot of flower photography or others, you're often got your eyes open, particularly for color. At least I do. I'm looking for color, and so when I see something like this cathedral in the distance, but these flowers, beautiful flowers, I was able to kind of frame the cathedral with them. Okay, as I mentioned, Italy. In 2014, I was JMU's faculty in residence in Florence. Italy, we had 24 undergraduates with us. Fortunately, they behaved. At least I don't know of anything. They didn't tell me of anything that they may have done not quite so right, but we had a good time with them. We went a number of different places in Italy. This one up here to the top right is from a little church in Fiesole, which is a little up the mountain from Florence. Then down here to the left, again, this is probably Florence, but I'm not quite sure. They're on a bicycle again. The one in the bottom middle, this is the Basilica of St. Francis. And so I got the rose made it really clear and blurred out the cathedral in the back. And then finally, here's another Assisi picture. But you can go anywhere. They're everywhere. Okay, I want to kind of end at this point. We may have some time where we can talk for a little while, any kind of questions, but here are different pictures. One place I do have to tell you about is this one where you see the Massanutten east of town, off Island Ford Road. That's from like McGackiesville, that road heading down to the river and to the Shenandoah. And about, if you're coming from town towards McGackiesville, you take a right-hand turn on Island Ford Road, go about a mile or so. And in about July, you go there, you go to the end of the road into the subdivision, which is not, it's not a very big subdivision yet. So you're kind of going toward the back, you'll run into this pond, which in August-ish, September, mostly August, they'll have one of the most beautiful, beautiful lilies. Not only this beautiful, larger whitish lily, but also some smaller pinkish ones that are just magnificent. And I just stumbled on it. I wasn't seeking it. I just went out there. My wife and I thought about, well, we might build a house there, and we ended up where we are now. So, but anyway, that's again something I stumbled. It was a free gift. So that's what I have at this point. I'm sure some of you may have questions. We're like about 12:45, so we have a few minutes left. I'd be glad to answer any questions people have.
Thanks, Frank. I'm going to unmute everyone's microphone, or at least give you the ability. You'll need to press the microphone icon if you have a question, comment for Frank, anything about the presentation or just about photography in general. I know we have a few photographers joining us for this meeting, and this space is free to use as you would wish.
Hey, Frank. I love the pulling the background out and turning it black to really bring out the color in the flowers. I don't use the Apple software, but I was wondering if there's any other software you might know about that could do that.
Well, I
guess
know
Photoshop could do it.
Photoshop will do it. Oh yeah.
Okay.
What I used was Photoshop Mix on an iPad. Is kind of like, I think what Adobe has done, and you might say taken Photoshop and just pulled out some pieces that run very well.
Oh, like a light version?
Yeah, a light version. And this was free.
Oh,
So
cool.
I had to play with it for a while, so to speak, but that's how I was able to do that. So I imagine they'd have free versions if you're using a Windows machine or an iPad, maybe even I have a laptop, an Apple iPad Pro, no, MacBook Pro. Anyway, but yes, it's pretty easy they should be pretty easy to find.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, one other question. I looked into the macro lens. They seem quite expensive.
Yeah,
800-900 for a decent one. Is that true?
yeah. I think I paid about 500 for mine. I got it. Oh my God, I probably got it over 10 years ago. It actually doesn't even have image stabilization. On the other hand, now there are some filters you can put in front of that will help magnify that. In some cases, I do my best job, like with my camera phone. It's not truly a macro lens, but I can get pretty close. But yeah, sometimes macro lenses can be fairly expensive. Joe Laughlin, do you have any thoughts on that? Or anyone else?
I don't really have or use macro lenses, only because I think the advantage of a expensive macro is that it's a wide angle, but when you get close to the flower, there's no distortion because it's such a wide angle, like an f/18 aperture, not aperture, millimeter. Whereas if you have a zoom lens, you just stand back and zoom in on it, and you get the short depth of field. And I'm sure there's a reason for macro lens, and for a really professional who has money coming in to pay for it, it's probably, worth buying. But in most cases, as I tell people, unless you have someone with a great, expensive, really good camera, take a photograph of something, and then you take it with your, mid-range camera or your camera phone, unless you can compare the two next to each other, nobody's going to know
Yeah.
that it could have been better.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
it's really in the eyes of the beholder. And I can remember having an old Kodak 110 pocket camera taking photos because I was in the right spot at the right time, and I recognized it was worth taking the picture. And therefore, the camera really wasn't, if I had a $10,000 something or other, I could probably have made a really great photo. But unless you could see it, you'd never know the difference. So I wouldn't buy a real expensive lens unless that's your primary focus is taking, close up photos. Then it might be worth doing. But I'm more of an event photographer, and I look for things that are happening, like fires or airplanes in the sky and that. So I'm not really into close up. I've taken photographs of flowers, everyone does, because that at that moment in that time, it looked really like I wanted to capture that image.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter what you got, whatever you got, that's what you're going to take the photo with.
The best camera you have is the one you have with you.
Right.
Yeah. And you're right. I'd forgotten, Joe, that actually if you have a camera with a zoom lens, sometimes when you're a little distant from it, but zooming in to a flower, or whatever close up, it's not much different than a macro lens, and you can get some very nice ones. All these four here, pictures here, were taken by my iPhone.
Yeah.
So,
And you have nothing to compare it against, so they look wonderful.
yeah, that's right.
If a guy with a $10,000 camera with macro lens took it, it might look 100 times better, but we don't have that photo to compare it against.
Yeah.
So it's in the eye of the beholder, and you take the best shot you had with what you got.
Yeah.
Half the time,
Right.
it's recognizing that it's worth taking the picture.
Yeah. And usually what we do with these pictures, we're not selling them per se. We want to share them with our family, share them on Facebook or Instagram or something like that. And those don't require super professional cameras. You can do something actually pretty nicely with an iPhone or an Android.
Frank, there were, I told you I would let you know if there were any questions in the chat window.
Sure.
You answered the questions that were there. So unless you have anything on your end, I think we've taken care of the chat window, but I do want to invite others. If you have questions or comments, feel free to press the microphone icon so that it will enable your microphone, and then you can speak directly to Frank.
Okay. Well, if they're
Frank,
not in, go ahead.
I
I'm sorry.
thought that orange flower in Sweden was a Tithonia. Do you know that one?
No, but it doesn't mean you're talking about the one, the one
Yeah.
on the bottom left?
Yeah.
It may well be. I just didn't know what it was. I haven't been able to find what it was. I guess the main points I wanted to make is that flowers are all around us. We don't have to have a special camera. We don't have to go to anywhere special. They can be in your backyard. That little one was in my grass. And I just see them as gifts. Every flower is a little different. And when I take a really nice one, I feel good. And with my photography, that's really what I'm after, feeling good.
I feel lucky when I get a good shot.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
Well, Frank, I want to thank you not just for sharing your tips with us, but for sharing your images. You know, you and I are friends on social media. I see the things that you post around our community, and some of these places I drive by and I see, but I see it differently through the perspective of your lens. And you've been talking about gifts, and that's certainly a gift, is seeing a world when you talk about these small flowers that can be invisible, but you bring it into focus. We really appreciate the natural beauty that we're blessed with in the Valley and Harrisonburg. So
Yeah.
again, thank you for your time that you're volunteering today, for the tips, for sharing your art with us. And for everyone who joined us today, thank you for being here. We hope you will come back in 2 weeks on May 4th. Our next presentation we will continue this discussion that Frank introduced today about the use of computer technology, but we will be talking about online safety and computer security with Ron Doyle. And Ron has been doing writing an article for a number of years for the Daily News Record titled Gray Hair Tech. So he specializes in technology for seniors. And we think this is something that you'll enjoy. Again, we're back on May 4th at noon. And Frank, again, thank you for giving us your time today.
Thanks for people coming out and joining me.
All right, until then, take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Frank.